Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
It is Depeche Mode, the podcast, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out another episode. I haven't used that intro in a while. I've been moving away from the My Nerd World label on my podcast, but I really like that intro. Thought I'd bring it back for this week. As always, if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, be sure to leave a comment, and whatever podcast that you are listening to, be sure to subscribe to that, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And as always, if you want to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Before we get into the content on this week's episode, I want to offer up a listening recommendation. I don't do this very often, and quite frankly, I don't find a lot of new music. I don't listen to traditional radio anymore, and it's often through watching television shows or movies and being exposed to new music that I end up finding a new band, and rarely is it one that I end up sort of enjoying. That is simply not the case, as I very much enjoyed this band called The Last Dinner Party. They have one album out called Prelude to Ecstasy, and the thing they have in common with Depeche Mode is that it was produced by James Ford. I believe the album came out last year, if not the year before. It hasn't been out very long. It's the debut album. This is a 5-member, all-female band, and the best way that I can describe them is if Morrissey and Susie Sue had daughters, this would be their band. I found this group watching the British television mystery series A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The young actress that stars in the series also starred alongside Jenna Ortega playing Wednesday Addams in the Netflix series Wednesday. Really enjoyable series, by the way. But in one of the episodes, the single from The Last Dinner Party, The Feminine Urge, was played during the episode. And when it was playing, I remember thinking, this sounds like Susie and the Banshees. And now, having spent some time with the album, I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to mention it on the podcast because I don't, like I said, I don't find new music very often, and I've been really enjoying this album. Thematically, there's a little bit of a through line there with Depeche, just in terms of the lyrical content. Very, very dramatic. I don't know the background of the lead singer, but I wouldn't be surprised if she was classically trained at a young age. The songs are incredibly dynamic. They are not, how do I want to describe it? They switch up tempos quite a bit, pacing, themes on the album. I've just really been enjoying this album. So if you want to take the time, find some new music, this is a band that I absolutely could have seen opening up for Depeche Mode, especially on the Memento Mori tour. Much in the same way that my favorite opening act for the band is probably The. I like Nights Are Ebb, but I loved the combination of The promoting the album Dusk on that devotional tour. I just thought the pairing of both of those bands and the promotion of both of those albums was just pitch perfect on the devotional tour. And The Last Dinner Party and their album Prelude to Ecstasy would have been a great opener for the band, especially considering this is an all-instrumental band. They're very talented musicians. The compositions of the songs and the instrumentation is absolutely fantastic. And it's an album that, much like many Depeche Mode albums, has grown on me quite a bit over the course of the past few months. Apart from Memento Mori, this is the album, Prelude to Ecstasy by The Last Dinner Party, that I've been spending the most time listening to. Some highlight tracks off of it, The Feminine Urge, as I mentioned, My Lady of Mercy, and Nothing Matters. They have a lot of videos, which have, a little bit in common with Depeche too, just because they're kind of off the beaten path in terms of music videos. But they have, music videos for the majority of the tracks on the album. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it if you take the time to go and listen to it. So I thought I'd deviate a little bit from the norm on the podcast and share with you a bit of a musical recommendation. This brings us to the content for the show this week. And as I do every single week, I scour the internet looking for anything new related to Depeche Mode to go and share with you. And as it's been now for the beginning of this year, there's very little to talk about. No new news yet coming out of the band. That's not to say Depeche Mode haven't been in the news, and in this case, sparked a little bit of controversy. Unexpected controversy that I don't necessarily agree with. If you were watching the Super Bowl last weekend, and if you're like me, it's one of the few events where you actually go and stick around for the commercials. It's been this way for decades because the commercials tend to be a lot of fun to watch. You were probably as surprised as I was when a commercial for a religious organization, I'm not going to necessarily call them Christian, they are, but I refer to them more as a religious organization called He Gets Us. And I'll get into more of this in a moment of why I call them a religious organization. They've run Super Bowl ads for the last few games over the course of the past few years. And as a matter of fact, last year's He Gets Us Super Bowl ad sparked a bit of controversy on its own because of some of the theming within the ad itself was offensive to some sort of traditional Christians. Now, I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I was raised in a staunch Christian household. I call myself a Christian today and go to church on a weekly basis. And I'll mention how this plays into what I'm talking about here. But if you were watching the game last week, you were probably as surprised as I was when this commercial comes up and they're playing the Johnny Cash cover of Personal Jesus. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of that cover. I'm not the biggest fan of Depeche Mode covers in and of themselves. It's not a bad cover by any stretch. I like me some Johnny Cash, but it's not anything that I'm going to specifically seek out to listen to. And I wasn't even planning on spending much time talking about it on the podcast this week, apart from a passing mention, because it's always fun to see Depeche Mode out in the real world, and especially on a platform like the Super Bowl with such a huge audience. I actually posted on X, hey, for those curious, that's Johnny Cash's cover of Depeche Mode's track Personal Jesus. So as I was scouring the internet this week, I happened on the Depeche Mode Reddit page, and one of the most recent posts by an individual who goes by Red Smoke 37 on Reddit was this: a Christian fundamentalist using a cover of Personal Jesus for their bull blank, I don't want to curse in the podcast, their bull expletive commercial during the Super Bowl is cringe AF. That is all. Now, the post goes on to, that was the title of the post, obviously upset that Personal Jesus was used during this commercial. They went on to write, I can't believe DM would have given permission for a Christian fundamentalist group to use one of their songs. Somebody else had posted, OMG, I thought the same thing. But I think because this is Cash's cover, they don't need DM's permission, ? Might be a really gray area. People went on to comment that in terms of the right to the song, it probably defaults to Johnny Cash's cover, in which case they would have to get permission from whatever label that Johnny Cash is on to go and run the song. Somebody else went and posted the background as to Johnny Cash doing this cover of Personal Jesus, writing, in the mid-1990s, early 2000s, Rick Rubin recorded a few albums with Johnny Cash, where he conceived Cash doing some covers. If I remember correctly, Rubin wanted to make Cash relevant again, increase his popularity with a younger generation. Hurt by Nine Inch Nails, indeed being the best-known cover by Cash, but a lot of other well-known songs as well. Personal Jesus, Rusty Cage by Soundgarden, I love that track, Bridge Over Troubled Water, etc. Okay, so let me get back to the initial comment here, because I have some commentary that I wanted to share, because I had an instinctive reaction to that. And I disagree with the commentary that Depeche Mode wouldn't have given permission for their song to be used with this organization. Okay. Now, I don't know the mindset of Martin or Dave. I'm just going off of what I know of Martin and Dave, just like you do, from interviews and of their music in and of itself. First off, regarding this organization, He Gets Us, I don't know a ton about this organization. I do know that a lot of traditional Christians don't really align themselves with this organization. Based off of some of the individuals that are behind the group, I think that their intention, in my opinion, is good. They want to spread the word of the gospel. and they're willing to go and spend money to get that message out there. And generally speaking, I like the overall themes of which they present in their messaging of trying to get people familiar with the Word of God, the Lord God Almighty, and Jesus Christ. But again, in terms of my own upbringing in church and Christianity, I have some disagreements specifically with some of what they espouse. Be that as it may, I think their intention is good. In terms of Depeche Mode not allowing them to use their music, or this being attached to what this poster on Reddit said, a Christian fundamentalist group, I wouldn't be so sure as to say that. And here's the reason why. Martin's lyrics, and Martin has been open about this in interviews, have, always dealt with religious themes. Much like the rest of the tracks that Martin has written, Dave to a lesser extent. There's an ambiguity to them, but throughout all of Depeche Mode's catalog, there's never been any shying away from referencing a higher power in some way, shape, or form. And for me personally, growing up, again, in a Christian household, my father was heavily involved in the church. Finding Depeche Mode at such an early age of around 13 and 14 years old, I remember being drawn to the band because of that lyrical content on the religious side of things that I could relate to. I remember going to my father after the release of Music for the Masses and playing for him Sacred, for example, and going through the lyrics and getting his thoughts on it. And, he was very open and honest in his assessment. He would speak to, there's obviously some religious themes in here. And as I mentioned, and he said the same thing, but there's a lot of ambiguity here. There doesn't seem anything specific to point to anything within the Bible specifically. But again, we know that Martin has used even biblical, references throughout his entire catalog. You look at a song like Sacred. You look at a song like Higher Love, right? Heaven Bound on the Wings of Love. I mean, again, there's an ambiguity to it, but as a believer in the Lord God Almighty, I always appreciated the band and Martin's writings because of that. You go all the way to Memento Mori and look at the lyrics of Soul With Me, and Martin's idea of him going up to heaven. So I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss that Depeche Mode wouldn't have allowed Personal Jesus, if it was the traditional version, to be used in this particular commercial. Now, I want to take a moment and reference that the band has in the past certainly been vocal over when the name of the band has been invoked by individuals or an individual that they certainly don't align with. And what was it, Richard Spencer? That jackass? I remember, again, I just don't like cursing on the podcast, but I remember when I believe it was him, and I don't have much familiarity with him, I just know the guy's an idiot, when he had said that Depeche Mode was his favorite band, and there was some minor controversy at that time where people got really up in arms thinking that there was this, what they considered a far-right radical that was saying that Depeche Mode, was the music for far-right radicals or something like that. And I never bought into any of that. That was ridiculous. That guy was a jerk, but the band was very vocal to take a moment and go and push back on that. And that's completely expected and warranted in that case. I mean, the guy's an idiot. But in this case, I was struck by how quick this poster on the thread was to go and sort of get upset, to go so far as to actually post that online. To be that, I backing away from all of the potential religious controversy over the statement or the view of it. I'm just always appreciative when Depeche Mode gets out into the real world in a regular way. I mean, there's an entire thread up on the homepage at Depeche Mode, Depeche-Mode on the home forum, talking about Depeche Mode out in the sort of real world where it just sort of pops up. So I just wanted to take a moment and share that with you in the absence of having any regular news. I thought it was an interesting take, and the religious overtones of Martin's music is something that I haven't talked about on the podcast before, but I find it to be one of the more endearing qualities of Depeche Mode's writing and music. And I know that, again, growing up with the band and growing up in a Christian household, I found it very insightful and challenging in my beliefs. When listening to the lyrics of a new Depeche Mode album and hearing Martin's take on religion. And he's been very open about how he's always been very curious about religion. And I think that the idea of religion or the idea of a higher power has really lends itself to what makes this band so special. And really, that ambiguity of Depeche Mode is part of what makes the band so unique, because you can go and take songs and apply them throughout your life to different facets of your life for different people in different ways, depending on what they do with it. Dave may write songs about his addiction, but you can take those songs about addiction and apply it to whatever you happen to be dealing with in your life, even if it's not to the extreme of what Dave was dealing with. When it comes to the religious themes, you may not be a Christian, you may be an atheist, you may think there is a higher power out there, but you don't, you're not attached to any specific, religion in and of itself, but you may find warmth and comfort in Martin Gore's lyrics and the music of the band in their ambiguity and embrace of religious themes. Listen, when it comes to the ad in and of itself, I think it's effective. Made me spend about 16 minutes talking about it on this week's podcast. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Even if you agree with the poster and you think that the band wouldn't go and wouldn't allow them to use their music in this, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, right? It's totally cool if we agree to disagree. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com. I always look forward to hearing from you. It has been a really quiet week. Not a lot going on news-wise, and this rings true when it comes to the listener feedback this week. I just have one that I want to share with you. I have received some other emails, but a lot of them have been more of a personal nature, not to be shared on the show, and some people just sharing with me some music that they found that they wanted to make sure that I've heard before in the past. So I just have one email that I wanted to share with you from the show this week, and this actually comes from YouTube. In reference to Javier from last week's episode saying the band should go and hang it up, Glenn 1965 writes this: Javier, wow, you might think you might be posting to poke the collective bear. Don't think any devotees would agree with your view. No, reliance on their back catalog. There would be an uproar if they didn't play the classics alongside new material in their concerts. Memento Mori is excellent. And for as long as Martin is writing and Dave is singing, the lineup is subjective. So thank you, Glenn, for that email this week. And post on YouTube. I greatly appreciate it. I was watching, speaking of YouTube, I watched the Ghosts Again video a couple times this week. It just popped up as I was just on YouTube perusing videos, and I hadn't watched it in a little while. I've made mention of how much I absolutely love that song. But watching that video, too, I was struck again by going back to the release of this album. And what actually prompted me to go weekly with the podcast and the release of Memento Mori, and how it really was a return of that Depeche Mode vibe that we had back during Black Celebration, Music for the Masses, Violator, Songs of Faith and Devotion, and Ultra, when we were all much younger, for those of us that are older now. That video was really fantastic. It again, in my opinion, it's Anton Corbijn at some of his best. I'll put it up there with the videos off of Violator and off of Songs of Faith and Devotion. I'll put that Ghosts Again video up there with Enjoy the Silence. Again, I think that there's kindred spirits there. But his use of black and white and the imagery in that video, and the first sort of introduction in over 7 years of Martin and Dave, much older, having lost a dear friend in Fletch of the band, just spot on. Absolutely spot on. Can't say as much with the other videos that have come out for Memento Mori, especially the ones that weren't directed by Anton. I do applaud the video directors for the other videos from the album in keeping with a general theme. I'm kind of hopeful that there'll be some sort of box set, DVD, Blu-ray package that includes all of those videos. I would love to have all the videos from Memento Mori, even though I'm not the biggest fan of them, but I think collectively together, much like Strange and Strange 2, they could work very, very well in that format. And if I had sort of my dream project of a release apart from the tour getting physically released and that expected Mexico tour documentary, I would love to see sort of a deluxe edition of Memento Mori that would include a package, something similar to what we got with Strange and Strange 2. A Strange 2. A Strange 3 with Memento Mori and those videos and those 4 unreleased, fully produced tracks. I don't know about you, but that sounds good to me. That wraps up the show for this week. If you haven't checked it out yet, I hope that you will look at my science fiction series, EMBARK, if you enjoy science fiction. 7 books in all in the series, telling a complete saga. 3 trilogies, a connection book that's book 4 in the series, and a second trilogy. As Earth faces its end, follow pilots Taft, Catha, and their crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. You love Depeche Mode and you like to read sci-fi, then treat yourself, a friend, or a family member to my EMBARK science fiction series. Set in the future where air and space flight culture has replaced car culture, inspired in part by Depeche Mode, life in the so-called space age, the world we live in, and life in general. Depeche Mode plays a large part in the underlying themes of the story, and the main character himself is a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time when the music of the 80s through the 2000s is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story, and they feature references to Depeche Mode and bands of that era, both direct and indirect, while telling an exciting science fiction space opera adventure story. It's fast-paced, it's action-packed, and available on Amazon.com. Just search for EMBARK and Jon, Jon Justice, and you'll find it in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook produced and narrated by me. Until next week, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you're safe. I'll talk to you then. God bless. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening
Depeche Mode, the podcast.